Hey, this is Mr. Glista bringing you ETC 5. And honestly, I'm kind of going off the cuff with this one. Usually I have a whole whiteboard with like a little script, but this one I just want to talk about guitar and how it works and how I manipulate the tone of mine to get it sounding how I want, because if all things go well, I'm going to be playing a lot of music this year. Solo with the Bubs, with my friend Jack Byron as the Sunspots. We're going to be touring a lot locally, so stay tuned for that. But in the meantime, let me teach you what I do with my guitar. This is a Paul Reed Smith Custom 24. It's a very versatile guitar. A lot of people use it from things from jazz to metal to rock to everything in between. And considering I'm kind of a genre jumper, it's perfectly suited for me. Why is it called a Custom 24? Because it has 24 frets, which is basically 24 different notes that I can hit across the span of the neck. Now, if I were to start at the lowest and go to the highest, I believe that's 4 octaves. So it's a huge span of different notes that you can hit. I love this guitar. I think it's like right at the point of diminishing returns where you're not really getting anything more for what you're paying for. It's like the cheapest American guitar you can get, basically. And can't say enough good things about Paul Reed Smith as a company. PRS are excellent guitars. As far as pickups, the way that a sound is actually produced from an electric guitar are from these two magnets here that are detecting the string vibrating above them. Now, this is called the neck pickup because it's closer to the neck of the guitar, and this one is the bridge pickup. What's the difference? Why are there often 2 or 3 on some guitars? Well, they have very different sounds to them. So I'm going to start with the bridge pickup and try to think of what the difference is between what you hear. Now here's the neck pickup. So, it's not that one is better or worse, it's really like a preference, a tone thing, a genre kind of thing. It's like what kind of sound are you going for? Now the bridge, if you might notice, is a little sparklier, a little more high-end, more treble. So you can hear the difference between those two. The bridge pickup is a lot harsher, a lot spikier, but sometimes you want that high end to make the sound stand out. And then the neck is a lot smoother. Now, it might be so subtle that you're like, what the heck are you talking about, Matt? Me personally, I love going in between. You can use both pickups at the same time. I think it gives you the best of both worlds because you stand out a little more with that high end from the bridge, but you also get that nice rich depth to it from the neck. So I'm playing like crap because I haven't really warmed up today, but you get the picture. So I often, I'd say like 80% of the time, I'm playing both pickups at the same time. Also kind of a ridiculous thing to worry about, but if one were to go out, I would at least have one. I wouldn't stop making sound. But if you're exclusively on one pickup and that pickup dies, all of a sudden you go off. I've never in my life had that happen, even with the cheapest of guitars, but it's a nice fail-safe. I do have one upstairs, my Cuban Tres guitar. It does have a bad bridge pickup because it's like handmade and hand soldered, not by me. But sometimes it goes out, so I always have that one on the split just in case. So something to consider. As far as the amp, you might be shocked to find out this is not a 15 watt amp. It's not even a 5 watt amp. This is a 1 watt tube amp. And I have it on very, very low volume right now because, believe it or not, a 1 watt amp would piss off my neighbors real quickly if I were to crank it up. It gets extremely loud. I'm literally going to be gigging with this 1 watt amp this year because it's got all the power I need And there's actually an advantage if you're using a tube amp, which means you have vacuum tubes that the current is going through, and tube amps are very popular for guitar because you get a lot of control over the aggressiveness of the sound. The alternative is called a solid state amp, which is way more reliable. It's the more modern type, less finicky components. You don't have to replace them. They're not as high maintenance solid state. And they can do a lot of cool things like modeling. They can sound like other amps and kind of recreate it, but it's never going to be the same feel as a tube amp. And when you have a 1-watt tube amp, it's really easy to push the tubes into a section where you get that crunch that guitar is known for. Now, another element to this whole thing, because it's just an interconnected system guitar. If you have your volume knob really low, you're not pushing enough sound into the amp to really get that tube saturation. So here's really low volume. Nice and clean. Now if I push it, you get a lot more distortion, a lot more of that breakup. It's pleasant. Now you want to find a happy medium. I would probably split somewhere in between there. Because too much distortion, you kind of lose like the clarity of the sound. But then not enough drive, it's kind of flat and kind of boring. So you got to find your preference, you know. Every guitarist kind of comes up with their own ideal tone that they aim for every time. Mine's very influenced by like David Gilmour, Wes Montgomery, I don't know, Ruben Nielsen of Unknown Mortal Orchestra, Kevin Parker of the old Tame Impala stuff. I really like those nice driven tones, but not like ridiculously driven. So you got to figure out what works for you and what works for your playing style. So the volume knob isn't as functional if you don't have this little gizmo here, which is a compressor pedal. Now, probably the most boring aspect of my guitar playing is my favorite pedal is a compressor pedal. I love them. A lot of people have their like overdrives and their fuzzes that they love, or some kind of modulation like a phaser. I love my looper, don't get me wrong, but it's been ticking me off lately because it's been dying on me and unreliable, the Line 6 DL4. But Keeley compressors, I own like 5 variations of these things. They're so amazing and they give you so much control over your sound because you can mess with the volume without actually messing with the volume that you're hearing, your perceived volume. So if I were to turn this off, this is what low volume playing sounds like. You probably can't even hear it. This is what high volume sounds like. It's night and day. So what a compressor does is it takes that input signal, and if it's too low, it will raise it up to an audible level. And if it's too harsh, it will push it down. It will compress the signal. A lot of people call it squishing. It basically limits how loud something can be and how quiet something can be. It brings it into a nice zone where you're always hearing it. Now that allows you to use your volume knob as kind of like a flavor. How much distortion do you want? If you push it really hard with high volume, or if you tail it off with low volume, see how it's cleaner, but I'm not losing the signal because the volume's too low. So compressors are a godsend. I highly recommend it. It's what a lot of people are missing from their pedal boards, honestly. They get swept up in all the fancy things that like really audibly change your tone. But if you're a serious guitarist, like professional or borderline professional, you gotta have a compressor, like first and foremost in your pedal chain. There's also a tone knob, which, I mean, I don't monkey with mine too much. Some people do some cool like tone sweeps, or you can do like volume sweeps, which I'm really bad at. I'll try to show you what that sounds like. That's terrible volume sweeping. I never do that, but basically it's like as you pluck, you roll the volume up with your pinky for a little fade effect. I prefer to just use a pedal for that. It's the cheap way. But the tone knob is basically like a high-pass filter. Some audiophiles will know what that means, but it's like a sliding filter that gets rid of the high frequencies depending on where you put the tone. So if I have it wide open, I never have it wide open because I think it gets a little harsh. I'll show you on the bridge. And I'm going to play with a pick. Thank you, Paul Martin, for this cool pick. And then with no tone. Let's play the same thing. Hold on. A. B. See how there's like no high end. It's way more pronounced than switching from the bridge to the neck pickup. I like it somewhere around like 60, 70% because I almost never use a pick. I always play with my fingers, which I think is very rare these days. I feel like most people are pick exclusive. But I just, something about not having to worry about having a pick. Do I have a pick or do I not? Because I often switch between different parts where I'm doing real like claw picking kind of style or finger picking where you're using all your fingers. And a pick is nice for when you're really strumming it, but I've just learned from one of my college girlfriends, as funny as that sounds, you can just use like the top of your index fingernail and just get what's very similar to a pick attack. I always used to use my thumb, but that's really blunt. If you can use your fingernail, it gets basically a pick-like sound, but you don't have to worry about dropping a pick or like, oh, I'm going to set it down when I switch to this finger picking part. No, seamless transitions. As far as the amp itself, I have a little bit of reverb on, slightly moderate amount of reverb. EQ, this amp is like a special EQ where it's not like high-end, low-end, it's like American mode, British mode. I don't even know which end is which. I have it somewhere in the Atlantic right now. And then volume and gain. I have the gain up at like a quarter. I have the volume under a quarter right now. I'm telling you, for a 1-watt amp, it gets ridiculously loud. Especially if you have a compressor in front that's controlling the volume. Yeah, it can really blast. But what else? This thing is often referred to as a whammy bar or a tremolo, and what it does is if I push down on it, it's going to relieve string tension and it's going to lower the pitch. If I pull up on it, it's going to increase the tension and raise the pitch. So here's a whammy down. And that was kind of like Better Call Saul. Oh, I've forgotten how to play that, but or a whammy up. And the nice thing is, a lot of people are afraid to... I have what's called a floating bridge, where I have this guy not sitting flat against the body. It's a little bit lifted, which gives you that ability to pull up. Because if I do something like a really hard bend during a solo, so it can pull that string out of tune. I think it's still pretty good. Alright, a testament to how nicely this guitar is set up. If I do a harsh bend like that with it locked down to the body, and especially without locking tuners, oftentimes it'll go and then it'll come back and it'll be like slightly under G, especially the G string, notorious for going out. So if I have that happen on stage and I'm a little flat, I can give it a little yank upward, boom, it's right back in tune. It's the, oh god, what is his name? Gaiezzo Frudois, this Italian genius luthier who often preaches this method. I think he's Italian. Gaiezzo Frudois or Carl Verheyen are the ones who, if you want to learn how to float a bridge properly, have it all balanced, you got to make sure you have the right amount of springs in the back here holding the whole bridge assembly on. It's very scientific how you set up your guitar. I used to just always take it to a shop and have them do it, but then once I started learning how to do it myself, it's super fun. It's awesome. And last but not least, because I'm gonna play a song using it, this guy is called a capo. And what a capo does is you've got very like traditional chord shapes. Like, you got your G, you got your, what did I say, G? C. You got your C, you got D, you got G. And I'm putting my fingers in very specific places. That's like, it's just something you memorize as a guitarist. But if I wanted to play, but higher up, each of them translated higher up. So if I go capo 3, very different sound because you're 1.5 steps up. 1, 2, 3 half steps, 1.5 steps higher in pitch. But I don't have to change where my fingers go. So those memorized positions, now they're new chords, but the same shapes. So, like C becomes D if I capo up 2 steps. So that's a C shape, but it's giving me a D chord sound. So capos are really nice. They unlock a lot of creative potential. I don't know why, if it's true or I made this up, but I've heard people stigmatize it like it's like cheating using a capo. That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Capos are not cheating. They are an important instrument, an important tool that I think all guitarists should use. So if you hear someone bad-mouthing a capo, it's because they don't know how to use it. What else? So this top section here is called the amp head, and it's actually where all the power is generated and where the tubes are. And then this lower part here is the speaker cabinet, and there's nothing fancy going on in here. This is just a box with a speaker, literally. So you have a speaker cable going from output from the head into the cabinet, and then boom, you got the sound. Now sometimes you have an all built in, and the head and the cabinet are one singular amp, and that's called a combo amp, because they combined the head and the speaker cab into the same unit. Now, these are things that I learned like way later in my guitar career. I never really even cared about this stuff, but I just thought it'd be fun if you're into, I don't know, guitars, classic rock, or rock in general, and you just want to know how this sound is made. Here's a little primer, and maybe I'll go more into detail someday, or I'll bring out a bunch of pedals and talk about the different effects you can do to audio, but I think that's enough for now. I gotta keep these podcasts shorter. So as always, I will end it with a song. And this one involves a capo. This is a new one of mine called Stand Schick. It'll be on my new album this year. Stand Schick, you see things as they are, not the way you want them to be. Stand Schick, they're laughing all around you, laughing but it's not funny. If ignorance is bliss, then insight is a curse, swaying back and forth. Oh, which one is worse? Stand Schick, carrying your burdens, they're starting to feel so heavy. Stand Schick, they're laughing right behind you, laughing but it's not comedy. If ignorance is bliss, then insight is a curse, swaying back and forth. Oh, which one is worse? If ignorance is bliss, then insight is a curse, swaying back and forth. Oh, which one is worse? Ignorance is bliss, then insight is a curse, swaying back and forth. Oh, which one is worse? If ignorance is bliss, then what is wisdom worth? Swaying back and forth. Oh, which one is worse? And that's how guitars work. Thank you for listening. Catch you next time.